On today's episode of True Echo, we bring you a story that will challenge your assumptions, shake your sense of justice, and inspire you with the quiet brilliance of someone long overlooked. When a powerful CEO jokingly invited a black cleaning woman into a high-stakes board meeting, he thought it would get a laugh. He had no idea she would walk in, and change the entire future of his company. Langford Logic's headquarters buzzed with a quiet sort of tension. The kind that hung just beneath glass surfaces and polished floors, where executives in custom suits carried lattes and stress in equal measure. At the top of that pyramid sat Charles Remington, 62, razor-sharp, and utterly convinced he knew how the world worked. His company had grown fast, expanding into mobile tech and AI services. He prided himself on cutting through fluff and demanded clarity from everyone around him. If you didn't bring value, you were noise. And Loretta Mayfield? In his eyes, she was background. She'd been cleaning the office for 5 years. Quiet, efficient, never late. She came in after 6, did her job, and left before midnight. To Charles, she was part of the scenery, like the hum of fluorescent lights or the steady click of keyboards. She wasn't someone to think about, let alone acknowledge in meetings. But that night, things changed. Charles had stayed late, nursing a lukewarm coffee and staring at numbers that didn't add up. A few younger execs lingered, including Jared Macon, the overzealous VP trying to impress everyone. Loretta entered quietly, wheeling her cleaning cart past the boardroom. Then Charles said it. "Hey Loretta," he called casually, not even turning his head. "Why don't you come in here and tell us what we're doing wrong?" The room chuckled. Jared snorted. Another VP smirked into his tablet. Loretta paused at the doorway, hands still on the cart. She looked at Charles, not angry, not hurt, just calm. She gave a small nod and kept walking. Jared, emboldened by the reaction, added, "Only if she brings cookies." Laughter followed. But Charles noticed something as Loretta walked away. Something in her look. Like she wasn't brushing it off. Like she'd filed it somewhere deep. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment, Loretta decided, if they were going to treat her like part of the wall, then she might as well let them hear what the walls had been listening to for years. Loretta didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small kitchen table under the soft buzz of a single overhead light, notebook open, pages filled with years of quiet observation. Some of it was scribbled in the margins of grocery lists. Some in tidy lines under bullet point headers like employee frustration or product glitches. She hadn't started writing with a goal. It had just helped her think. But now. That joke, it cracked something open. Not just in her, but in the very structure of Langford Logic. They'd invited her in. Not on purpose, but with just enough carelessness for the door to swing open a crack. Her mama used to say, they only let you through when they stop noticing they're holding the door. And that night, Charles had held it open just long enough. By sunrise, she had her answer. She wasn't going to shout or demand. That wasn't her way. But she wasn't going to stay silent anymore either. She took her day off, which meant juggling other jobs, rearranging her usual afternoon route at the local clinic. But she used her spare hour to sew. She pulled her old Singer machine out of the closet, stitched a blazer from leftover royal blue fabric, and ironed it until it looked ready. It wasn't perfect, but it looked official enough. Then she circled 3 words in her notebook. Retention. Design. Trust. That would be her message. By 8:02 the next morning, Loretta walked through the front doors of Langford Logic, not in her cleaning uniform, not with rubber gloves or bleach on her skin, but in that hand-sewn blazer, clean slacks, and polished shoes. Tanya at reception blinked in confusion. "Miss Mayfield? Are you here early today?" "I'm here to sit in on the board meeting," Loretta said smoothly. "The board meeting?" "That's the one," she smiled. "Mr. Remington invited me yesterday." Tanya stammered, confused but unsure what to do. Loretta didn't wait. She walked calmly toward the elevators. Upstairs, the boardroom was already bustling. Jared adjusted his sneaker laces with an air of casual arrogance. Priya Patel, the only woman and the sharpest voice at the table, flipped through her presentation. Charles stood at the head of the table, tapping his pen against a folder. Then the elevator dinged. And in walked Loretta Mayfield. At first, they didn't recognize her. She didn't look like the woman who wiped their glass doors or restocked the paper towels. Her posture was upright. Her chin held high. The notebook tucked neatly under her arm. Charles squinted, then let out a small laugh. "Well, look who we've got," he said, trying to recover. "Didn't think you'd take me seriously." Loretta stepped forward. "You said I should come and share my insights. So I figured, why not?" The room stilled. Jared scoffed, but no one else laughed. Charles rubbed the back of his neck. "Right. Well. This is a private meeting, you know." "I know," Loretta replied. "But you said it. I listened. So I came." The room was silent again. She held their gaze, unflinching. "I won't take long. I've got 3 points. If they don't matter, I'll leave. But I'd like the chance to say them." Charles hesitated. She stood there not like a janitor with a favor to ask, but like someone who had something real to offer. And the room? They felt it. Whether they admitted it or not. 5 minutes, Charles said finally. "Let's hear it." Loretta walked to the end of the table but didn't sit. She opened her notebook. "The first issue is retention. You're losing not just customers, but people. Good employees. They're not leaving because of money. They're leaving because they feel ignored." She paused and looked directly at Jared. He shifted in his seat. "Second, design. You're building tech that doesn't consider your full audience. People who use different languages, different habits, your app frustrates them. And when they complain, support has no power to help." She flipped to the next page. "And third, trust. It doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes. A missed follow-up. A broken promise. A help ticket no one responds to. People don't rage quit. They just stop caring." She closed her notebook. "That's all." No one moved. No one laughed. It was Victor Crane who finally broke the silence. The senior exec coughed once, then said, "Actually, that last bit about trust. That matches something I saw in our feedback survey last quarter." Jared scoffed. "Are we seriously entertaining this?" Priya turned, sharp. "Why wouldn't we?" "She's not part of this team," Jared replied, louder now. "Not in this room. Not at this level." Loretta raised one eyebrow. "Not on your level. That's the problem." Charles lifted a hand. "Okay. That's enough." The tension was thick now. But something was cracking. Charles looked at Loretta, really looked. She hadn't flinched. Hadn't rambled. She'd given him more insight in 4 minutes than most consultants he'd paid tens of thousands for. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to say. Charles Remington leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning under his shifting weight. The silence that filled the boardroom wasn't just quiet, it was uncomfortable, almost reverent. Loretta stood there, notebook now closed, her gaze unwavering. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't tried to dazzle. But somehow, her words echoed louder than any presentation they'd heard all quarter. It was Priya who spoke first after the tension hung for too long. "If she's right, and frankly, I think she is, we'd be fools to let this moment pass." She looked directly at Charles. "She's here. Let's not waste it." Charles hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You've got the floor. Keep going." Loretta didn't blink. She just flipped to another section in her notebook and stepped a little closer to the whiteboard. "I've noticed something in this company," she began. "You've got departments working in silos. Engineers solving problems that customer service reps already told you about, but no one's listening across the divide." Victor's pen scribbled quickly. He wasn't even trying to hide his interest anymore. "Also," Loretta continued, "your surveys. You send them to people who stopped using your app months ago. You're asking the wrong users the wrong questions. That doesn't give you insight. It gives you a false sense of progress." Jared folded his arms and leaned back, chewing the end of his pen with the kind of posture that screamed resistance. But Loretta wasn't talking to him. Not anymore. She scanned the room. This company has the bones of something great. But culture doesn't build itself. It shows up in the small things. In who gets to speak. And who doesn't. That line landed. Priya sat back in her chair, nodding slowly. Even Charles seemed frozen in thought. He stared into his coffee, probably realizing how cold it had gotten. "I admit," he said quietly, "I didn't see this coming. Wasn't prepared for it." Loretta nodded. "Neither was I when you made the joke." Charles offered a dry chuckle. "Touché." She added softly, "It's not about guts. It's about clarity. I had it. So I showed up." Victor tapped the table. "Honestly, she's saying things we've needed to hear for years. She's not wrong." "I still think this sets a weird precedent," Jared muttered. "Are we going to let anyone with a cleaning cart walk into a board meeting and give strategy now?" Loretta turned toward him slowly. "I didn't walk in because I clean. I walked in because I listen. Every night. For 5 years. And I connected dots no one else bothered to connect." Victor chuckled. "She's got more accuracy than some of the consultants we hired last year." Charles didn't laugh this time. He looked right at Loretta. "You've been working here all this time. Listening. And we didn't even notice." She held his gaze. "I wasn't hiding. But I also wasn't waiting for permission." Another silence. But this one felt different. Not stiff. Reflective. Priya leaned forward. "What would you recommend we change? Starting now?" Loretta didn't miss a beat. "Start with listening. Not surveys. Not anonymous polls. Real conversations. Managers need to be trained to accept criticism without defensiveness. Support teams need tools that actually work. Not outdated documentation and 3 clicks to nowhere." Charles blinked slowly, absorbing it all. "And your customer service pipeline," she added. "It's built to frustrate people. You could fix it in a month if you empowered your agents and stopped burying their feedback." She flipped to the back of her notebook, tore out a handwritten page, and walked it over to Priya. "These are your 10 most common user complaints. Based on everything I've heard, seen, and tracked. I grouped them into 4 themes: response time, clarity, billing confusion, and app functionality." Priya scanned the page, eyebrows rising. It was raw, but clearly thought out. She passed it to Victor, who looked both impressed and guilty. "You've been doing homework," he muttered. Loretta folded her hands. "It's not homework. It's my way of staying sharp. I have 2 kids, and I didn't want my brain to turn into a mop handle." Even Jared didn't have a comeback. Charles finally stood. "You've given us more insight in 15 minutes than we've had from entire quarters of feedback." Loretta didn't smile. "Maybe we should put you on payroll," Charles added, offering what he thought was a friendly quip. But Loretta's response was calm, and razor-sharp. "Then do it properly." It was a challenge, and everyone in the room heard it. Victor leaned back, clearly impressed. Priya gave the faintest smile. Jared looked down like he wished the floor would open up and swallow him whole. Charles exhaled, rubbing his temple. All right. Let's take 5. But no one moved. Loretta gathered her notebook. I'm done. I didn't come for applause. I didn't come for a job. I came to be heard. And then she walked out. No fanfare. No drama. Just the soft sound of heels against tile, and the weight of a room realizing it had just witnessed something it could never unsee. The boardroom remained frozen long after Loretta's footsteps had faded down the hallway. Charles stood still, one hand braced against the edge of the table, the other hanging at his side like it didn't know what to do. Jared was the first to speak, though his voice had lost the sharp edge it carried earlier. She just walked out like she owned the place. Victor didn't even look up from the page Loretta had handed out. She didn't walk out like she owned the place. She walked out like she didn't need it. Charles dropped back into his chair. The room had shifted, and not just in tone. For the first time in his decades as a leader, he didn't feel like the center of gravity. Priya stood and followed Loretta out of the room. No one stopped her. No one dared. She caught up to Loretta just before the elevator. That was bold, she said, breathless, but not condescending. Loretta glanced back. I wasn't trying to be bold. I just couldn't keep pretending. Priya nodded. Would you be willing to talk again? Properly. Not like this. Loretta considered her for a second. If it's real talk, then yes. I'm always willing. The elevator opened. She stepped in without another word. Back upstairs, the meeting unraveled quickly. No one brought up the app rollout. No one cared about the updated Q2 forecast. Every conversation that followed felt hollow next to what they had just witnessed. Later that evening, when Loretta arrived for her usual cleaning shift, everything was different. Tanya at the front desk stood when she saw her. Miss Mayfield, she said carefully, with a mix of respect and hesitation. Loretta smiled politely and moved on. On the 5th floor, a wiry young man from UX named Theo stepped out of the break room holding a coffee. He was the kind who always had headphones dangling around his neck. He looked stunned when he saw her. You're kind of a legend right now, he said. Loretta laughed under her breath. That right? He nodded. It's all over Slack. People said you roasted the board. She tilted her head. I didn't roast anyone. I just gave them something to think about. Well, Theo grinned, mission accomplished. As she continued down the hallway, vacuum humming behind her, she noticed something she hadn't before: people were watching her. Not with ridicule. Not with pity. With respect. With curiosity. Not everyone smiled. Not everyone approved. But something had shifted. Upstairs, Charles sat alone in his office, long after the rest of the team had gone home. He wasn't looking at spreadsheets. He wasn't on a call. He was staring at an old photo frame pulled from his desk drawer. It was his mother. Ruth Remington. She stood in front of their old house in Lubbock, wearing gardening gloves and holding a trowel, her smile crooked and weathered by decades of quiet labor. She had been a housekeeper her entire life, cleaning homes for people who called her Rosie, because they couldn't be bothered to learn her real name. Charles remembered how she used to come home with sore feet and bruised knees. She'd never once been asked for her opinion, but she always had one. Smart, grounded thoughts, about people, about money, about the little things that mattered. And now, decades later, her son had grown into the very man who overlooked a woman just like her. That shame stuck to him like static. He reached for his phone and sent a message to his assistant. Schedule a one-on-one with Loretta Mayfield. Tomorrow. Noon. In my office. He hit send. Then leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, let himself feel small. The next morning, Loretta walked into Langford Logic at 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes early. No cleaning cart. No gloves. Just her blue blazer and a calm, focused presence. She passed Tanya, who nodded as if she'd known all along this day was coming, and took the elevator up to the executive floor. Charles stood when she entered his office. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing toward the seat across from his desk. Loretta sat. No notebook. No folder. Just her. "I owe you an apology," Charles began. "What I said the other night, it wasn't okay. I thought I was being clever. But it was disrespectful." Loretta didn't nod. She didn't wave it away. "I know," she said. "But I also know you're not the first person to treat me like background noise." Charles winced at that, but didn't argue. He folded his hands on the desk. "I've been thinking," he said. "We spend so much time scaling, chasing the next round of funding, the next release, we stopped listening to the people right in front of us. People who see what we miss every day. The gaps aren't the problem," Loretta said calmly. "Ignoring them is." He nodded. "Exactly." There was a pause. One of those full, loaded silences. "I want to bring you in," Charles said. "Consulting basis. Work with Priya and Victor. Help us look at culture, customer support, employee retention. Start small, with real input, and real pay." "I still have a job," Loretta said simply. "I clean 6 buildings a week. I can't drop everything overnight." "We'll work around your schedule," Charles replied quickly. "Project-based. Flexible hours. You set the pace." She studied him. Not with admiration. Not with resentment. Just quiet discernment. "I'll consider it," she said. "But don't bring me in just to say you did. I'm not a gesture." "You're not," Charles said, and for once his voice sounded more human than polished. "Not anymore." Loretta gave him a long look. "I never was." That landed harder than anything he'd heard in weeks. Charles sat back, silenced again. He wasn't used to silence. Not in his own office. A knock interrupted them. It was Priya, holding a folder. "Sorry to interrupt," she began, then saw Loretta and brightened. "Oh good, I was hoping to catch you." Charles stood. "Actually, this might be perfect timing. We were just talking about you working together." Priya stepped in, handed Loretta the folder. "It's a draft of a new employee feedback process. I'd love your input." Loretta took the folder, flipped it open briefly, then nodded. "Happy to." The conversation flowed from there, not about theory, but about real change. About what came next. No one raised their voices. No one postured. They just worked. And Charles? For the first time in a long time, he felt something stir that had long been buried beneath spreadsheets and stock options. Hope. But Loretta knew better than to believe words alone. She'd spent her whole life listening to promises with no follow-through. If they were going to do this right, it couldn't be performative. It had to be real. And she'd be watching. Because being invited to the table wasn't the goal. Making the table better for everyone else, that was the real mission. By Thursday afternoon, Loretta Mayfield's name quietly appeared in the Langford Logic Company directory, not under Facilities, but under a new title. Internal Culture and Customer Insight Advisor. There was no press release. No welcome balloon bouquet. Just a name and a role added to the system. Most employees stumbled upon it while searching for something else and did a double take. Word spread fast. The following Monday, Loretta attended her first formal meeting, not with the board, but with the customer support and product development teams. For the first time in company history, those two departments had been pulled into the same room without an emergency prompting it. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. in Conference Room C, but by 9:45, the room was full. No one was late. People were curious, cautious, a little skeptical. Loretta entered holding a manila folder and a pen. No fanfare. No performance. She walked straight to the whiteboard, wrote in bold letters. Why we lose people. Then turned to face the room. I'm not here to give a speech, she said plainly. I'm here because too many of you work in the same building, trying to solve the same problems, without talking to each other. Silence. She went on. There are good people in this company. Smart people. But I've watched you bury broken systems under polite meetings. Then wonder why your solutions fall flat. Several staff shifted in their seats. Some curious. Some uncomfortable. She handed a printed sheet to Felix, the senior product manager. This is a list of 200 support tickets flagged as user error. I read through every one. You know what I didn't see? Felix skimmed the sheet, frowning. One single follow-up asking why the user was confused in the first place, Loretta finished. He glanced up, looking uneasy. You don't fix a company from the top down, she said. You fix it when people who never meet start having honest conversations. No hierarchy. Just truth. Alina, a team lead from support, raised her hand. She always wore her hair in a tight bun and rarely spoke in meetings unless asked. So what exactly is your role now? She asked, eyes cautious but open. Loretta smiled faintly. Good question. Think of me as the person who asks the hard questions back. Who connects the dots everyone keeps stepping over. Heads nodded. People listened. And for the next hour, the meeting transformed. Not into a presentation. Not into a complaint session. Into a conversation. Engineers heard support reps describe ticket patterns they never knew existed. Support learned that developers had been trying to fix things with incomplete information. Loretta barely spoke after the first 10 minutes, she just steered, redirected, and let the room take over. Later that day, Charles walked down the 5th-floor hallway just in time to see Loretta exiting the meeting room. She was tucking her notes away as she passed. Loretta, he called. She turned, composed as ever. I heard about the meeting, Charles said. Good job. She nodded. People just needed space to speak freely. He smiled, but it faded quickly. Do you think this'll stick? That people won't just go back to the way things were? Loretta stepped closer, her voice steady. That depends on you. And them. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep pushing. But this company only changes if people at the top stop pretending change is someone else's job. Charles felt that. Deep. She gave a small nod and turned to leave. But he couldn't help himself. Loretta, he said again, softer this time. Your mother would be proud, you know. She paused, her hand on the stair rail. She didn't ask how he knew. She just looked over her shoulder and said. So would yours. Then she walked away. And even as the building returned to its routine, no one could quite shake the sense that something permanent had been put in motion. 3 months later, Langford Logic didn't look different on the outside. The logo hadn't changed. The furniture was still modern, sleek, and a little too expensive. The coffee still tasted like burnt ambition. But something in the air was different. Tangible. Gone were the silent divides between departments. The stiff smiles. That's not my problem energy that once blanketed entire floors. It had been replaced, not by miracles, not by slogans, but by people asking better questions. Because of Loretta Mayfield. Every Tuesday, she hosted a session in conference room C called Ground Floor. No slide decks. No status reports. Just folding chairs in a circle, and one question written on a whiteboard. What's not working, and why hasn't it changed? The meetings weren't mandatory. But they filled up. Interns sat next to senior engineers. Office managers pitched ideas beside analytics staff. Some of the best innovations started in those sessions, not because Loretta led them with flair, but because she led them with humility. She listened. She asked the one question no one else dared to ask. Okay, but why is it still like that? Soon, others started asking it too. One morning, Charles attended a ground floor session, unannounced. He sat in the back, hands folded. A junior IT associate brought up how onboarding new hires was confusing. Two team leads gave explanations. Then a voice from marketing offered a quick, simple fix. Loretta said nothing, just let the room solve its own puzzle. Charles realized then, this room didn't need him. And that was the point. After the session, as people filed out, Charles caught Loretta in the hallway. He didn't make it formal. You built something, he said. Loretta turned. I didn't build it. I just cleared space. The building was already there. They shared a moment. No need for applause. Just understanding. Meanwhile, changes kept rippling outward. Department heads who once dismissed junior complaints were now required to attend monthly listening sessions. Feedback wasn't filtered by HR anymore, it came direct, face to face. Customer support agents had a permanent liaison in product development. Alina from the old support team now led it. And cleaning staff. They had names now. People learned them. Tanya at the front desk had started calling Loretta Ms. Mayfield. Not because anyone told her to, but because it was finally clear that respect wasn't optional. It was overdue. Not everyone welcomed the shift. Jared quietly resigned a month after Loretta's second report. No official statement. But everyone knew. The old power structure, the one that laughed loudest, had cracked. And Loretta? She didn't celebrate his exit. She didn't gloat. She just kept showing up. Doing the work. One afternoon in the break room, Theo, the wiry young UX guy, sat down across from her with a microwave burrito and a question burning in his eyes. Can I ask you something personal? He said. Loretta shrugged. Depends what it is. He hesitated. What made you do it? That day in the boardroom? She sipped her tea and thought for a moment. My mama used to say, when someone opens the door, even by accident, you walk through. 'Cause they won't keep it open for long. Theo nodded slowly. That's good. I wasn't trying to shake the place, she added. I just knew I couldn't keep sweeping around the cracks and pretending I didn't see them. He leaned back, eyes wide. You changed everything. She gave a small smile. Nah. I just reminded them they hadn't changed enough. That Friday, something new appeared on the wall outside conference room C. A framed photo. No plaque. No spotlight. Just a candid shot of a ground floor session, employees in a circle, leaning forward, speaking freely. Beneath it, a simple card read. She taught us to listen. It didn't need a name. Because if you worked at Langford Logic, you already knew. And if you didn't, you'd hear the story soon enough. Loretta Mayfield didn't rise through the ranks the traditional way. She wasn't given a seat, she pulled out her own chair. And when the room finally paused long enough to listen, she reminded them all that titles mean nothing without truth. Sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room is the one that's been quiet the longest. If Loretta's story moved you, share it. Talk about it. And remember, don't just look at who's speaking loudest, listen to the person no one else notices. Subscribe to True Echo for more stories that matter. Drop a comment to share your thoughts, and never forget, real change starts with paying attention.